My girlfriend lied to me about being pregnant. My girlfriend, Nadia, and I are what you'd call an odd couple, and our story is, well, let's say it's unique. We met in college, during a literature class. She was the outspoken one, always raising her hand, her voice full of confidence and her opinion strong. Me? I was the quiet guy in the back, the one who loved words but never quite found the courage to speak them out loud. But Nadia, she noticed me. I still don't know why. Our first conversation was about Hemingway. She claimed to have read all his works by the age of 12. I raised an eyebrow, impressed and a bit skeptical. That was my first glimpse into Nadia's habit, embellishing the truth. But back then, it was just a quirky trait that made her more interesting. Fast forward a few years, we're both out of college, navigating the complexities of adult life. Nadia is a graphic designer with a flair for the dramatic, both in her designs and her storytelling. And me? I'm an IT guy, the stereotypical tech nerd, I guess. Our life together is generally peaceful, filled with small joys. We love our weekend mornings, lounging in bed with coffee and pancakes, talking about everything and nothing. Nadia's stories are the highlight, wild, exaggerated tales of her work week. Like that time she claimed her design was so good it made a client cry tears of joy. I chuckled, knowing it was an exaggeration, but loving her enthusiasm. The thing is, Nadia's habit of bending the truth isn't always harmless. Like when she told our friends we were going on a luxury vacation, which was actually just a budget road trip, still fun, though. Or when she exaggerated a minor disagreement we had, turning it into a dramatic saga for her friends. But let's rewind to how we fell for each other, because that's important. It was a cold evening in November, a few months after our first meeting. We bumped into each other at a local bookstore. She was animatedly explaining to the cashier how she'd met her favorite author and had a deep conversation about the meaning of life. I smiled, remembering her penchant for tall tales. We ended up spending hours in that bookstore, talking about our favorite books, life, and our dreams. That's when I saw beyond Nadia's embellishments. I saw her passion, her intelligence, and her kind heart. She saw in me, well, I'm not sure. Maybe a willing listener, a calm presence. Whatever it was, it worked. We've been inseparable since. Our relationship is a roller coaster, thanks to Nadia's flair for drama. Like the time she told everyone she'd won a prestigious design award. I was proud until I realized it was just a local competition. But her excitement was infectious, and I couldn't help but celebrate with her. It's not all sunshine, though. Nadia's exaggerations have caused misunderstandings. I've had friends question the veracity of my stories, thinking I might be like Nadia. It's frustrating, but I understand. Nadia's charm lies in her larger-than-life stories, but they cast a long shadow. Despite the challenges, I love her. I love her creativity, her energy, her zest for life. But I can't help but worry. What happens when her exaggerations catch up to her? What if one day, the line between truth and fiction blurs too much? I've tried talking to her about it, gently pointing out when her stories veer too far from reality. She laughs it off, saying it's just her way of making life more interesting. And maybe she's right. Maybe life with Nadia is meant to be a grand, exaggerated adventure. The evening I decided to introduce Nadia to my parents was one I had anticipated for weeks. I was excited but nervous about how they would react to her, especially given her penchant for stretching the truth. As we drove to my childhood home, Nadia was a bundle of nerves and excitement, rehearsing stories about her work and life. We're almost there, I said, trying to ease the tension. Just be yourself, they're going to love you. Nadia smiled, I hope so. My parents welcomed us warmly. Nadia, it's so wonderful to meet you, my mother said, enveloping her in a hug. My father offered a firm handshake, his eyes kind but observant. The dinner started off beautifully. My mom had outdone herself with the spread, and Nadia seemed to be fitting in perfectly. She regaled them with tales of her work as a graphic designer, each story more impressive than the last. As we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, my dad, a seasoned accountant, asked Nadia about the financial side of her projects. Nadia, eager to impress, launched into a story. Oh, the accounting part is quite a challenge. I often find myself doing the accountant's work too. Just last week, I had to recalibrate the entire budget for a project. It was a mess, but I managed to balance the sheets and even identified some cost-saving measures. My dad's eyebrows rose slightly, a sign I knew meant he was intrigued. That's quite a skill set, balancing creative and financial responsibilities. What software did you use for the accounting? Nadia paused, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Well, the usual ones, you know, the standard accounting software. I see, my dad replied, his tone neutral but curious. Did you use a double entry system or a single entry for the bookkeeping? I felt a knot form in my stomach. Nadia was venturing into waters far beyond her depth. She hesitated, then said, double entry, of course. It's more efficient that way. My dad nodded, his expression unreadable. Interesting. And how did you handle the depreciation calculations for your assets? At this point, I could see Nadia struggling to keep up. Depreciation? Oh, that was a bit tricky, but I managed to work it out. I knew my dad had caught on to Nadia's embellishments. He was an expert in his field, and Nadia's vague responses were clear indicators she was out of her depth. The conversation slowly shifted away from work, but the damage was done. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Nadia's usual vivacious demeanor had dimmed, replaced by a quiet, almost embarrassed, composure. After we said our goodbyes and drove home, the car was filled with an uncomfortable silence. I knew this dinner had been a turning point. I admired Nadia's creativity and her ability to spin tales, but her tendency to exaggerate had never been so glaringly exposed. That night, lying in bed, my mind raced with thoughts. I loved Nadia, but I also knew that our relationship couldn't progress without addressing this issue. Her habit of embellishing the truth, though often harmless, had the potential to create serious misunderstandings and mistrust. The morning after the dinner with my parents, I knew it was time to have the conversation I'd been dreading. As Nadia and I sat at our small kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee, I gathered my thoughts. The sunlight streaming in through the window seemed too cheerful for the seriousness of our talk. Nadia, I started, my voice hesitant, about last night at dinner. She looked up, her eyes guarded. What about it? I took a deep breath. I noticed how some of the things you said about your work, they weren't exactly true. My dad picked up on it too. Nadia's expression changed instantly. What are you saying? That I'm a liar? No, it's not like that, I hurried to clarify. It's just that sometimes you tend to exaggerate things, and it can be misleading. She put down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. I can't believe this. You're calling me out for being a good storyteller? Is that a crime now? I reached across the table, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away. It's not about storytelling, Nadia. It's about honesty. Last night was important to me, and I felt like my parents didn't get to see the real you. The real me? Nadia's voice rose in frustration. So, what? You think I'm just a bundle of lies? That's not what I'm saying, I replied, struggling to keep my own emotions in check. I love your creativity, your energy. But when it comes to certain things, especially important things, we need to be honest with each other and with others. Nadia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. So now you're the honesty police? You're perfect, and I'm just the girlfriend who can't be trusted? I stood too, feeling the conversation spiraling. Nadia, please, let's just talk about this calmly. Calmly? She scoffed. You accuse me of being a liar, and you want me to be calm? You don't get it, do you? My stories, they're a part of who I am. They make life more interesting, more bearable. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the walls going up. I know life can be dull sometimes, but we can't just create our own truths to make it better. There are consequences. Consequences? Nadia's voice broke a little. You think I don't know that? You think I don't know that sometimes I go too far? But it's not easy, being trapped in the mundane. My stories, they give me freedom. Her vulnerability struck a chord in me. I understand that. I do. But we're talking about our future here. I want to trust you, completely. I want to know that what we have is based on reality, not just stories. Nadia sank back into her chair, her defenses crumbling. I'm scared, she whispered. Scared of being ordinary, of being forgotten. My stories make me feel alive, special. I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. You are special, Nadia, with or without the stories. You don't need to embellish anything to be important to me. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked away. I don't know if I can change. I'm not asking you to change who you are, I said softly. Just to share the real you with me, with my family. We love you for you, not for the stories you tell. We sat there in silence for a while, the tension slowly dissipating. While it was an extremely awkward conversation, I hoped it would mean a change in Nadia's behavior. In the weeks following our heart-to-heart, the air between Nadia and me was thick with unspoken words and tentative glances. We tiptoed around each other, both aware of the fragile truce we had reached. It wasn't easy. The conversation had opened up a Pandora's box of doubts and insecurities, and we were both struggling to navigate this new terrain in our relationship. It was a chilly Tuesday evening when the next twist in our story unfolded. I had just come home from work, my mind weary from staring at computer screens and decoding software issues. Nadia was in the kitchen, her back to me as she stirred something on the stove. Hey, I said, my voice tentative. How was your day? She turned, a tight smile on her face. Fine, just another day. I could sense something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The last few weeks had been a roller coaster, and I wasn't sure if this was just another dip or something more. I hung up my coat and joined her in the kitchen, trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Smells good. What are you making? Soup, she replied curtly. I thought something light would be good. We ate in silence, the clinking of our spoons against the bowls echoing louder than our thoughts. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but words failed me. It was Nadia who broke the silence. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a freight train. What? Are you sure? She nodded, her eyes not meeting mine. Yes, I'm sure. I took the test this morning. A myriad of emotions washed over me, surprise, fear, excitement, concern. But above all, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. Nadia, we're going to have a baby? She finally looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. Yes, we're going to have a baby. The revelation of Nadia's pregnancy transformed everything. All my life, I had dreamed of becoming not just a father, but a daddy, a man who would do anything for his family, who would cherish every first step, every first word. That dream was now becoming a reality, and the joy I felt was indescribable. My heart swelled with a happiness I had never known. All thoughts of our past arguments and her habit of exaggerating faded away in the wake of this incredible news. "Nadia, this is amazing," I exclaimed, my voice a mix of surprise and elation. "We're going to have a baby." Her eyes, filled with a mix of fear and hope, searched mine. You're happy about this?" "Happy?" I echoed, taking her hands in mine. "I'm over the moon, Nadia. This is what I've always wanted. To be a dad, to have a family with you." A smile broke through her uncertainty, and she threw her arms around me. "I was so worried about how you'd react, especially after everything that's happened." I held her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine. "Nothing matters more to me than this, Nadia. We're going to be parents. We're going to have a family." In the following weeks, my life took on a new purpose. I immersed myself in every aspect of pregnancy and parenthood. I read books, joined online forums, and even started following daddy blogs. I wanted to be prepared, to be the best father I could be. Nadia watched this transformation with a mix of amusement and affection. "Look at you, already in daddy mode," she would say, laughing as I rambled on about the latest parenting techniques I'd read about. But it wasn't just about reading and learning. I wanted to be there for Nadia in every way possible. I took over the household chores so she could rest, cooked meals to ensure she was eating healthily, and attended every doctor's appointment with her. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Nadia resting her head on my shoulder, she spoke of her dreams. "I've always wanted this, to be a mom, to have a family. And now, with you, it's happening. I'm so happy." Her words filled me with a sense of pride and determination. "I'm going to be there for you, for our baby, every step of the way. We're in this together." My action shifted to doting care, preparing healthy meals, ensuring she was comfortable, and constantly checking in on how she was feeling. However, I started to notice a change in Nadia. She seemed more distant, her usual vibrancy dimmed under the weight of her own thoughts. I attributed it to the hormonal changes and the stress of early pregnancy, trying my best to provide her with the space and support she needed. One evening, I broached the topic of announcing the pregnancy to my parents. "Nadia, I think it's time we share the news with my folks. They'll be over the moon." Nadia hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I don't know, I'm nervous about telling them." I was taken aback by her reluctance. "But why? They adore you, and they're going to be thrilled about becoming grandparents." She looked up, her eyes reflecting a turmoil of emotions. "It's just a lot, Everything's happening so fast." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "We're in this together, remember? My parents will be there for us, for you. They'll want to support us through this." After some persuasion, Nadia reluctantly agreed to accompany me to my parents' house to share the news. The drive there was quiet, Nadia lost in her thoughts, and I tried to fill the silence with optimistic chatter about the future. As we arrived, my parents greeted us with their usual warmth. "To what do we owe this surprise visit?" my mom asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. I glanced at Nadia, who gave me a weak nod. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Mom, Dad, we have some news. Nadia's pregnant. You're going to be grandparents." The reaction was immediate and joyful. My parents were ecstatic, hugging us both, their smiles wide and genuine. But amidst the celebration, I couldn't help but notice Nadia's discomfort. She smiled and thanked my parents, but her eyes didn't mirror the happiness around us. The rest of the visit passed in a blur of congratulations and excited chatter about the future. My parents were full of questions and advice, their enthusiasm palpable. But Nadia remained unusually quiet, her responses brief and forced. On the drive home, the silence was more pronounced. Nadia stared out the window, her expression unreadable. I wanted to reach out, to understand what was going through her mind, but I also didn't want to push her. "Nadia, are you okay?" I finally asked, the worry clear in my voice. She turned to look at me, her eyes glistening in the dim light of the car. "I don't know. I just feel overwhelmed." Nadia's change in behavior lingered in my mind as we drove home in silence. Her reluctance to share our news with my parents had seemed out of character, and her reaction afterward was even more puzzling. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more she wasn't telling me. Once home, as Nadia retreated to our bedroom, claiming she needed rest, I found myself alone with my thoughts. Her words echoed in my head. "I feel like I'm losing control." Why was she so nervous about telling my parents? What was really going on? Unable to find peace, I decided to clean up a bit, hoping that physical activity would help clear my mind. As I gathered the trash from various rooms, a small box fell out from the bathroom bin. Curious, I picked it up and felt my heart stop. It was a pregnancy test box. But why would Nadia throw it away so carelessly? Compelled by a sinking feeling, I opened the box. Inside, I found several used tests, all clearly marked negative. My mind raced with confusion and disbelief. Negative? But Nadia had told me she was pregnant. She had seemed so sure. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I went to the bedroom, where Nadia lay curled up on the bed. "Nadia," I began, my voice shaky with emotion. "I found these in the trash." I held up the pregnancy tests, my hand trembling. She sat up, her eyes widening as she saw what I was holding. "Where did you find those?" "In the trash, I repeated, my voice rising. They're all negative, Nadia. What's going on? Why did you tell me you were pregnant? For a moment, she was silent, her eyes avoiding mine. Then, she shrugged, a casual, almost dismissive gesture that fueled my frustration. I don't know, I wanted to see how you'd react, she said, her voice devoid of the warmth I had known. How I'd react? I was incredulous. You lied to me about something so significant, just to see my reaction? She looked away, her voice cold. You deserved it. After all your suspicions, questioning my stories. I wanted you to feel what it's like to be doubted. I felt as if I had been punched in the gut. So, this was some sort of revenge? You played with my emotions, my hopes of being a father, just because you were upset with me? Nadia didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I loved, who I had dreamed of starting a family with, had deceived me in the most cruel way possible. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me. I needed to get out, to breathe. I can't believe this, I muttered, my voice breaking. I can't be with someone who would do this. I left the room, Nadia's voice following me, but her words were a distant echo. I packed a bag with essentials, my movements robotic. As I zipped up the bag, I took one last look around the home we had built together, a home I had believed was filled with love and trust. I left the house, the door closing behind me with a finality that marked the end of our relationship. The cool night air hit me, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. In the days that followed, I shared the truth with my parents and our close friends. It was a painful confession, but necessary. I needed them to know the truth, to understand why I had walked away from Nadia. The breakup was messy, filled with harsh words and accusations. Nadia's reaction was a mix of anger and indifference, further cementing my decision. It was over, and there was no going back. As I moved on, rebuilding my life without Nadia, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Trust was not just a word, it was the foundation of any relationship. And once broken, it was almost impossible to rebuild. In the end, Nadia's lie was her undoing. It not only ended our relationship but also tarnished the memories we had shared. I realized that truth, no matter how hard, was always better than a lie, no matter how comforting it might seem in the moment.